Hello, I'm Guru Scott. On this video, we're going to be changing the rear rotors and brake pads on a 2000 Jetta Mark IV automobile. So we're going to show you what we're going to do to get started here in just a moment. And so I'll be right back. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this, let's call it a hubcap. And to do it, you take a sharp object like a hook and you can pull it out very carefully. And note that it's keyed, it goes in a certain way. So if you look at where the valve stem is on the tire, there's actually a diagram on the little hubcap that shows you which way it goes towards that. And if you don't put it on right, you'll end up damaging it. So make sure you do that. So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna take a 17 millimeter 6-point thin wall socket and we're gonna loosen all of these lug nuts. Okay, so at this point we've loosened those, but not taken them out, just barely loosened them. And we're starting to jack up the car. Remember to always wear your safety glasses when you're working on your car. And also we're gonna jack it up and put a jack stand under it for safety, and then we'll pull the wheel and we'll be right back. Okay, at this point we have the rear wheel off on the passenger side. And we're going to be taking this screw out, and that'll allow us to take this off. But first we're going to work with taking the caliper part of it loose. Not sure how we're going to do that yet, so we'll just get it started and then we'll explain how we did it after we get it done. Okay, to take this assembly apart, you're going to put a 15 millimeter, preferably thin, backing wrench and take a 13 millimeter socket and take loose the bolt. And there's one on the top and then one down at the bottom. So you'll take those loose and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, we'll pull the caliper assembly loose from the carrier assembly. Forgot to mention that the best thing to do is to take the emergency brake cable loose. And you would do that by loosening the brake, of course. And then there's a clip that you take off. And the thing, you can work it off carefully and take it out. And then the pads just simply slide into some spring-like holders. And so we will take those out. And then we'll pull the rotor. Looks like we may have to take one more assembly off. So it looks like we have to take the carrier assembly loose, possibly. We're going to check that out and we'll let you know. Okay, at this point we're going to take the caliper carrier loose. It had two Allen bolts holding it on. And we're kind of convinced that they're permanently Loctited at the factory because we put a lot of torque on them and couldn't break them loose. We also used some different materials to try to get them broken loose. So rather than destroying them, we decided we're going to try to take the rotor out by slipping it past the carrier assembly, which we've read that you can do that. So we're going to do that and see how that comes out. Okay, we took the Phillips screw that holds that in place out. And now we're going to slip the rotor out from the carrier assembly. It looks like it just comes right out. So we're going to do that, clean everything up, and we'll start reassembly here in a minute. And we'll show you how to push in the piston on the caliper assembly as well. While you're in here and have access, you can take a soft brush and clean the ABS sensor components. So that's something you might want to do while you're in here. But I don't know if you can use solvents on it or not. We're not going to, because we're not sure if they'll cause any kind of problems with the plastics or any of the materials used to make the ABS sensing system. Okay, at this point we're ready to push the piston back into the caliper, and we're using the special tool that we had gotten at Harbor Freight, and it's also available on Amazon, and then an 11 millimeter wrench to loosen the bleeder valve. So one of us will loosen the bleeder valve while the other person pushes in the piston, closing the bleeder valve each time when it's not being pushed in so we don't get any air into the system. So we'll do that and then we will be back. At this point we've put on the new rotor and we put the screw in right here with some Loctite on it, just good and snug. And over here we put in the guide pins with new rubber boots that came with the kit, and also we greased them appropriately. So that's all ready to go on. So now the next thing we need to do is put the caliper assembly back onto the carrier and then put the pads in at the same time. So we're going to figure that out and we'll be right back. Okay, at this point we have reassembled the unit, and It's 26 foot-pounds of torque for these bolts here, and you have to put a backing wrench on them, and 48 foot-pounds of torque for the carrier mounting bolt. There's two of them that go in behind if you were to take those loose. We didn't take those apart. And so we're ready to start bleeding the brakes now. One thing I wanted to mention was this tool you're going to use to push in the piston. Use the clockwise version. And what we found was as we turned it, it tended to lock up even though we had the bleeder valve all the way open. So we would back it off and then reapply it, and we were very patient, had to do that about 10 or 12 times, and then all of a sudden the piston started freely rotating clockwise and moving in, and it bottomed out. So that was no problem after that point, but that's kind of a helpful hint that we found. At this point, we put it all back together, and we manipulated the parking brake to make sure that it would seat everything properly, and we bled the rear brake, and now we're getting ready to put the rear tire on, and the lug nut torque is 92 foot-pounds of torque. And so we're going to do that. We'll move to the other side, and that's all there is to this. If you have any questions, feel free to send me your questions and I'll try to answer them. Until next time, tschüss.